Ice water shocked me awake on the rooftop. Lyra's laughter sharp as broken glass. Her words sharper. Lazy old hag. Stop sleeping. I said nothing, just smiled and made a single call. By the time her phone began shrieking downstairs, she was the one trembling. That was the first crack. The second came later, in the lawyer's office, when a screen flickered on and my late husband's face appeared, looking into the camera as if he were looking through time itself. If you're watching this, Glenda, someone is trying to take advantage of you. The room went silent enough to hear the old clock breathe. I had raised my son, Darren, largely on my own long shifts at the diner. Then night classes with textbooks propped against the sink while the laundry churned. When Richard came into our lives, he steadied the ground beneath us. We bought the house together, sunlight in the kitchen, a maple that flamed red every autumn, and for decades it was proof that ordinary love could be cathedral strong. When cancer found him, he fought with the calm of a man who made lists and kept his promises. 6 months after we buried him, Darren and his wife, Lyra, moved in to help. Grief blunts the edges of judgment, and mine was a fog I mistook for mercy. Help arrived as rearranged drawers, discarded mugs, and framed photographs removed to modernize the space. Help sounded like, "You're mixing up names again," when I paused to swallow the ache in my throat. Help tallied utilities, hinted at rising taxes, and suggested a manageable future that sounded like a brochure for a cheerful prison. I kept telling myself we were a family in transition. Lyra kept telling me I was forgetful. Darren, whose spine had once been cedar straight, leaned toward whatever kept the air untroubled. The day of the lawyers' meeting, Mr. Richardson presiding, Margaret clicking her tongue. Uncle Tom shifting uncomfortably, Lyra spoke first. She called my home, our house, and my age a problem with a solution. "There's a lovely facility an hour away," she said brightly, as if talking about a spa day. Darren wouldn't look at me. Maybe professional care. "Mom?" he murmured, the word mom landing on the table like a receipt for services rendered. It wasn't rage I felt. It was the slow, realizing cold of having misread the weather for 2 full years. Mr. Richardson cleared his throat. There was, he said, a sealed document in his safe. Richard's instructions were precise, open only if I was mistreated or threatened with removal from my home. Lyra rolled her eyes. Darren finally looked at me, boyish uncertainty briefly cracking his adult mask. When the envelope opened, out slid a disk and several documents thick with witnessing. Richard filled the screen, thinner than I wanted to remember. Eyes steady. "I've been watching," he said. "I won't have it." Grief had taught me to brace for loss, not for defense. Yet there he was, outlining careful steps, anticipating the future as if mapping a storm's path. As the video paused for Mr. Richardson to adjust the volume, memories slotted themselves into place. The lost photographs, the confusing phone call that interrupted me at the stove, the helpful lists of expenses I paid because they said I should. I thought of the morning on the roof when Lyra doused me with ice water and called it a joke. I thought of the phone call I made afterward to Mr. Richardson to ask if today met Richard's conditions. His answer had been simple. Yes. The screen brightened again. 3 months before I died, Richard said, voice even. I restructured our assets. Lyra's smile tightened. Darren's knuckles whitened against the chair. Mr. Richardson slid a document toward me. The legal words were a forest, but their meaning was sunlight. Richard had created a revocable living trust. The house, the accounts, the investments structured with me as primary beneficiary and trustee. There were conditions, he said gently. Not for cruelty, but for protection. Any attempt to coerce me into surrendering my home or to force institutionalization would sever claims to inheritance. Mistreatment would trigger immediate protections and control. He had anticipated not only the storm, but the cleverness of those who sail into one expecting to profit from it. I stared at my hands, suddenly seeing the strength in them that grief had disguised. Lyra whispered, "This can't be legal," like someone bargaining with a locked door. Mr. Richardson's reply was the locksmith's patience. "It is not only legal," he said. "It is thorough." Richard's journal dates, times, witnesses sat on the table like a lighthouse log. Each entry a kept watch that I hadn't known I had. Shame moved across Darren's face in waves he couldn't contain. For a moment, I saw the boy who crawled into my bed during thunderstorms and asked if I could make Sunday pancakes even on Wednesdays. I almost softened, almost reached for him. Then the memory of Lyra's voice nursing home, burden. Our house hardened my spine back to itself. I hadn't disappeared. I had only been standing too still. Mr. Richardson asked if I was ready to hear the rest. I nodded, feeling the strange returning warmth of dignity in my chest. The map was about to become a road. The road was about to become mine again. Richard's image on the screen leaned closer, his voice threaded with both tenderness and iron. "Glenda, you need to understand what I've done. The house isn't co-owned with Darren. It belongs to the trust, with you as trustee. The savings accounts, the investments, every dollar is tied to protections I wrote for you. If anyone mistreats you, they forfeit their claims. If anyone forces you toward a nursing home against your will, they lose everything." The words cracked through the silence like thunder. Lyra's manicured fingers stopped drumming on the table. Darren sat frozen, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Mr. Richardson lifted a thick document from the envelope, his eyes scanning the clauses with deliberate care. "Your husband was exacting. This agreement gives you full control. You own the home outright. You control the bank accounts. You decide who has access." My breath caught as he continued, "And there is a recovery clause. Any money given to family members under false pretenses can be reclaimed. Renovations, utilities, mortgage contributions, they are debts, not gifts." My pulse hammered in my ears. Nearly $50,000 had disappeared from my savings in the last 2 years. Money for a refrigerator, a bathroom remodel, endless supposed mortgage payments, all of it could return. Lyra shot to her feet, her voice sharp with disbelief. "You can't just demand money back after the fact. We've been living there. It's family, Mr. Richardson remained calm. "Legally, it was tenancy. At current market value, rent for the past 18 months is over $43,000. Combined with reimbursements, that's nearly $100,000 owed." Lyra's face drained of color. Darren whispered, "Mom, we didn't know." I looked directly at him. "But you knew the lies. You watched me write checks for bills that didn't exist. You let her call me incompetent. You let her erase your father's memory from his own home." He bowed his head, shame etched in every line of his face. Mr. Richardson produced a sealed envelope, slimmer than the trust documents. "Your husband also left you a personal letter." My fingers trembled as I unfolded it, Richard's handwriting reaching across time. "My dearest Glenda, If you're reading this, then my fears have come true. Our son has allowed cruelty into our home. But you are not weak. You are the strongest person I've ever known. Do not let their disrespect erase the decades of strength that carried this family. You owe them nothing except what they earn through respect and kindness. Tears blurred the words, but I read on, each sentence restoring a piece of me that grief had stolen. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope, my hands steadier than they had been in years. I want them out of my house by the end of the week, I said, my voice carrying through the room. I want every dollar owed documented and returned, and I want no further illusions about whose house it is. Lyra's composure shattered. We're family. You can't throw us into the street. I looked at her with all the calm of a woman who had rediscovered her backbone. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't humiliate. Family doesn't plan nursing homes for someone still strong enough to climb her own roof. Tom cleared his throat uncomfortably. But even he didn't challenge me. Darren's uncle and Margaret had witnessed enough to know the tide had turned. Lyra's tears came hot and loud. But they weren't sorrow, they were the sound of schemes collapsing. Darren finally whispered, "Mom, please, what can I do to fix this?" I stood. Richard's letter clutched against my chest. "I don't know if you can fix it, Darren, but I know this: I will never again live in a house where my worth is treated like debt to be collected." As I walked toward the door, Lyra's voice followed me, panicked and shrill. "We'll contest it. We'll fight this in court. I didn't turn back. Mr. Richardson's calm response was enough. Your father-in-law consulted 3 separate attorneys. The trust will hold. Lyra's cry echoed behind me as I stepped into the daylight. But for the first time in years, the weight on my chest was gone. I had walked into that office as a woman shrinking under grief and manipulation. I walked out as a woman holding the keys to her own life again. That night, I entered the house that Richard and I had built. For the first time since his funeral, it felt like home again. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was mine. I opened the window to let the cool evening air in, clutching his letter one more time. He had kept his promise. Even in death, he had protected me. The house was still mine, but stepping through the door that evening felt like entering a different life. The kitchen no longer hummed with Lyra's sharp laughter or Darren's uneasy silence. For the first time in 2 years, the air felt clean. Yet I knew the battle wasn't over. Down the hall, I heard Lyra on the phone, her voice pitched with desperation. She can't just kick us out. There has to be something we can do legally. When she noticed me, she hung up quickly, her face blotched from crying, but her eyes hard with calculation. "Glenda, we need to talk," she began, attempting calm. "No," I said, walking past her toward the stairs. "You need to pack. You have until Sunday." Her mask cracked. "This is Darren's home too. He grew up here. You can't throw your own son out on the street." I stopped on the stairwell, turning to face her. "He chose to stand by while you humiliated me. He chose to help you deceive me about my own finances. Those were his choices. Now he lives with the consequences." She raised her voice, a last weapon. What kind of mother does this? What kind of mother throws out her own child? The words pierced, but then Richard's letter echoed in my mind. You owe them nothing except what they earn through respect and kindness. I lifted my chin. The kind of mother who finally understands that love without respect isn't love at all. Darren returned moments later. Weariness etched into his face. He looked like a man already carrying years of regret. "Mom," he said, his voice low. "Please, can we talk?" Lyra rushed to his side, clutching his arm, spinning a web of excuses, but Darren surprised us both. "Stop," he told her, gently pulling away. "Just stop for once." His eyes found mine. "I know I let you down. I know I failed you, but please, can you give me another chance for a heartbeat? I saw the boy who once begged for pancakes on Sunday mornings. But then I remembered all the Sundays since when he had let me carry the weight alone." "What kind of chance?" Darren, I asked. "A chance to keep lying about bills? A chance to keep letting her throw away your father's belongings? A chance to treat me like I'm senile?" He faltered. "No. I mean, a real chance? Boundaries? Counseling? I'll change." I searched his face, but what I saw was not conviction. It was desperation. The desperation of a man realizing he had lost not just his home, but the inheritance he had counted on. "When was the last time you stood up for me?" I pressed. Silence answered. "When was the last time you visited without needing money, or thanked me for what I gave?" Again. Silence. His tears came, but I couldn't tell if they were for me or for himself. Lyra tried again, her voice dripping with false contrition. "We all made mistakes. Glenda, we can start over? Families forgive." I almost laughed. "Hurt my feelings. You convinced me I was losing my mind. You made me pay for things already paid. You threw away my husband's belongings. You threatened to lock me in a nursing home. That wasn't hurting my feelings. That was abuse." She flinched at the word, but recovered quickly. "I was trying to help. The house is too big." I held her gaze. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was grieving. There's a difference. Then her phone rang. She paled. "It's the lawyer I called," she whispered to Darren. "She thinks we might contest the trust." I stepped closer, calm as ice. "Answer it. But know this while you're wasting money on lawyers. I'll be charging rent for every day you stay here, plus interest on what you owe. All legally enforceable." I showed her the text from Mr. Richardson, $125 per day, 8% interest annually, compounding monthly. Her mouth dropped open. Darren collapsed into a chair, his face buried in his hands. "Mom, where are we supposed to go?" "We don't have money for a deposit." "Not if we pay you back?" For a flicker, my heart softened. But then I remembered her voice in the lawyer's office. "You're going to end up with nothing." I steadied myself. "You should have thought about that before deciding I was disposable." I began climbing the stairs again, then paused. "And Lyra? I want my mother's china and my grandmother's jewelry back. The ones you claimed were safer in your room." Her protest was instant. "Those were gifts." I smiled for the first time all day. "Prove it." Their whispers rose behind me, frantic and cornered. But for once, none of it was mine to solve. In my bedroom, I set Richard's letter on the nightstand. For 2 years I had felt powerless, but the truth was simpler. I had been grieving, not weak, and grief had finally given way to something else. Resolve. Sunday came faster than I expected. By evening, their suitcases stood by the door, and the house echoed with the clamor of things being stuffed into boxes. Lyra wept theatrically, her sobs filling the air, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were the tears of someone watching a scheme collapse. Darren looked hollow, shoulders slumped as if carrying stones. When they finally left, slamming the door behind them, I stood in the hallway alone, but the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was mine. Mr. Richardson handled the paperwork with his usual precision. Within weeks, the accounting was finished. Back rent, fraudulent expenses, and stolen belongings brought the total to $127,000. Lyra sold her car and jewelry to cover part of it. They paid me $23,000 up front, the rest arranged in monthly installments that would stretch for years. The old me might have forgiven the debt, but Richard's letter rang in my ears. You owe them nothing except what they earn through respect and kindness. They had earned consequences, not clemency. 6 months later, the house was transformed. Richard's photographs were back on the mantel. His favorite chipped coffee mug sat safely in the cabinet. The maple outside turned crimson in autumn, without anyone suggesting it should be cut down. My bridge club met again every Tuesday. The laughter of old friends filling rooms once filled with tension. I had even started volunteering at the senior center, helping others protect their finances from manipulative family members. Too many had stories like mine children who blurred love into obligation, who called cruelty help. Then came a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. Hello, Mom? Darren's voice said softly. My breath caught. We hadn't spoken since the day they moved out, though monthly checks still arrived. I was wondering if we could meet, maybe for coffee. His words stumbled. I've been going to counseling. Alone, not with Lyra. I needed to understand how things went so wrong. My instinct was skepticism, but there was a sincerity in his voice I hadn't heard in years. What have you learned? I asked. A pause stretched long before he answered. That I stopped being your son somewhere along the way? That I became someone Dad would have been ashamed of? He told me he and Lyra had separated. She wanted him to declare bankruptcy to escape paying me back. When he refused, she left for Phoenix. I was choosing to do the right thing, he said simply. For the first time, his words sounded like his own, not echoes of her. Mom, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I needed you to know I finally understand what I did. What I let her do to you. My heart twisted, equal parts relief and sorrow. Would you like to come to dinner on Sunday? I heard myself ask. I'll make pot roast. His voice trembled. Are you sure I'm sure? I said, but Darren, we're starting from scratch. You don't get to be my son again just because you were born to me. You have to earn it. He agreed, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to hope. That Sunday, as I chopped vegetables and set the table for one more chair, I felt Richard's presence in the quiet rhythm of the house. His letter had told me I was strong, and now I believed it. I wasn't the frail, confused woman they had tried to make me. I was Glenda Patterson, 60 years old, survivor of grief, keeper of my dignity, and now, maybe, a mother reclaiming her son, not through guilt, not through fear, but through boundaries and truth. When Darren arrived, he looked older, humbled. He hugged me carefully, as though afraid I might break. But I didn't. I was stronger than he knew, stronger than I had remembered. And as we sat down to eat, I realized the story wasn't about losing family. It was about learning that real family is built on respect. Without it, love is only another word for control. The months that followed were quiet, but not lonely. The house breathed again, full of my choices and my memories. I joined neighbors for walks, replanted the flower beds, and even started seeing a kind widower from church for coffee. Nothing serious, just laughter shared without sharp edges. For the first time since Richard's death, I felt like myself again, not someone's burden, not someone's victim, but a woman who had endured and come out whole. One afternoon, a package arrived at my door. The return address read, Phoenix. Inside was a velvet box containing my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one Lyra had sworn was lost. There was a note, Mrs. Patterson. I found this among my daughter's belongings. She told me it was hers, but the inscription says otherwise. I thought you should have it back. I'm sorry for any trouble my daughter caused you. Patricia Morrison. I held the pearls in my hands, remembering my grandmother fastening them around my neck on my wedding day. For a moment, anger threatened, but then it softened into pity. Lyra had traded family for greed and manipulation, and in the end, she had nothing to show for it but the ashes of schemes. That night, I called my neighbor Helen, one of the friends who had been driven away when Lyra controlled the house. Do you remember what I was like before I asked? Helen was quiet, then said firmly, You were strong, Glenda. You took care of everyone, but you also took care of yourself. You didn't let people walk over you. I smiled through tears. I think I'm finding her again. Helen laughed softly. Good. I missed her. As I prepared for bed, I studied the woman in the mirror. Wrinkles traced my cheeks. Gray streaked my hair. But my eyes were steady. I wasn't the frail old woman they'd tried to convince me I was. I was the widow who had raised a son alone after Richard's first heart attack. The mother who had worked 2 jobs and still made it to every baseball game. The woman who had survived grief and betrayal and found her strength again. Darren visited every Sunday after that first dinner. Slowly, cautiously, he began earning back my trust. Sometimes he helped with the garden. Sometimes he just sat with me in the living room, talking about his counseling sessions. He didn't ask for money. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He simply showed up. And though forgiveness would take time, I realized that maybe Richard's faith in our son hadn't been wasted after all. Life taught me something I want you to remember. Love without respect is not love. It's manipulation. And no matter how much you've given, no matter how many years you've sacrificed, you are allowed to draw the line and say enough, because you are stronger than you know, and you deserve dignity, peace, and freedom in your own home. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so more people can hear stories that remind us of our strength. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? I'd love to hear your thoughts.